Hello again, it's me. Thank you so much for coming back to spend a little bit of time with me and to join in on this conversation about something I have been thinking about quite deeply these last few weeks. If you have been here before, you know that I like to share with you the things that are real, the things that are honest, the things that perhaps we don't always say out loud, but that many of us feel quietly in the privacy of our own hearts. And today's topic is one of those. It came to me not during some grand moment of reflection, but during a very ordinary evening when I was sitting alone and a question drifted into my mind uninvited, the way the most important questions always do. The question was this: if I could start my life over, knowing everything I know now, what is the very first thing I would do? Walk with me for a moment. There's something I need to find, and I want you to come with me to that place where honesty lives, where the masks come off, where we stop pretending we have it all figured out. Turn the page. Don't be afraid of what's written there. Every beginning was once an ending. Every ending hides a beginning. Say you'll look. Don't close your eyes. Let the truth come and sit beside you. You and I, we have earned the right to be honest. As we have often talked about here, life absolutely does not come with a map, does it? We are born into a world that hands us a script before we can even read. Be good, be quiet, be successful, be married by a certain age, have children by a certain age, have a career that impresses the people at the dinner table. Have a life that looks beautiful from the outside, regardless of what it feels like from the inside. And most of us, myself included, spend decades following that script without ever stopping to ask whether it was ever ours to begin with. Those of you who have followed me for a while know that I have lived many chapters in this life. I have been young and fearless, and I have been older and afraid. I have held on to things I should have released, and I have let go of things I should have held tighter. I have made choices out of love, and I have made choices out of fear. And honestly, if I look back with total candor, more of my major life decisions were made out of fear than out of love. Not fear of danger, not fear of failure, fear of disapproval, fear of being left behind, fear of not measuring up to some invisible standard I had internalized so deeply that I couldn't even see it anymore. It had simply become the air I breathed. I want to tell you about a moment that changed the way I think about all of this. A few months ago, I was sorting through some old boxes in my home. You know how it is, those boxes that follow you from house to house, decade to decade, that you never fully unpack, but you also never throw away because they hold pieces of a life you once lived. I found a letter I had written to myself when I was 23 years old. I had completely forgotten it existed. It was tucked inside a journal with a cracked spine and faded pages, and the handwriting was so different from mine now, so eager, so certain, so full of plans. And I sat on the floor of that room and I read it, and I felt something I wasn't prepared to feel. I felt grief. Not for a person I had lost, but for a person I had been. A young woman who had so much fire and so much hope, and who was about to spend the next several decades slowly, quietly, without even realizing it, trading that fire for acceptance. The letter said things like, "I want to travel the world and write about what I see," and "I never want to live a life that someone else designed for me," and "I want to love people freely without being afraid they'll leave." And as I read those words, I realized that almost every single one of those desires had been set aside, not because life forced me to set them aside, but because I chose over and over again in 1,000 small invisible moments to prioritize what was expected of me over what was true to me. Now I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. You're thinking, well, that's just life. We all have to make compromises. We all have to grow up and be responsible. And I understand that. I truly do. I am not suggesting that we should all live like carefree 23-year-olds forever. But what I am suggesting, what I know to be true now in a way I didn't know before, is that there is a difference between making conscious compromises and slowly abandoning yourself so gradually that you wake up one morning at 50 or 60 or 70 and you don't recognize the person in the mirror. Not because life did this to you, but because you allowed it to happen, one small surrender at a time. And that is when the question came to me. If I started life over, what would I do first? Not what would I do eventually, not what would I do when the time was right. What would I do first, before anything else, before the career, before the relationships, before the plans and the expectations and the scripts handed to me by the world? I thought about this for days. I turned it over and over in my mind, and I arrived at three things. Three things that, if I had the chance to begin again, I would do before anything else. And I share them with you not because I believe I have all the answers, but because perhaps there is someone here today who is still early enough in their journey to act on these things. Or someone who is not so early, but who needs to hear that it is never too late to begin again, even if you cannot literally start over. The first thing I would do, the very first thing, before I chose a career, before I chose a partner, before I chose a city to live in or a path to follow, is I would learn who I am. Not who my parents told me I am, not who my teachers said I should be, not who my culture or my religion or my society or my friends expected me to be. I would sit down with myself, quietly and honestly, and I would ask the questions that most of us spend our entire lives avoiding. What do I actually value? What brings me joy? Not the kind of joy that looks good on paper, but the kind that makes my chest feel warm and full. What am I afraid of? And are those fears mine, or were they given to me by someone else? What do I believe about love, about success, about meaning, about God? And do I believe those things because I have examined them and found them true, or because I inherited them the way I inherited my eye color? Find the room where your true self is waiting. She's been there all along. Sitting in the quiet, patient, unchanged by the years. Open the door. Don't be afraid of what you see. The face looking back at you is the one you were always meant to wear. Because here is what I have learned, and I have learned it the hard way through decades of living someone else's definition of a good life. If you do not know who you are, every choice you make will be a guess. Every relationship you enter will be a compromise. Every path you walk will be someone else's path dressed up as your own. And you will spend years, maybe decades, feeling a vague dissatisfaction that you cannot name because you are living a life that fits someone who doesn't exist, a version of you that was invented by other people's expectations. The second thing I would do is I would learn to be alone and to love it. Not to tolerate being alone, not to endure it as a waiting room between relationships, not to use it as a temporary station on the way to finding someone. I would learn to be alone the way you learn a language, fluently, deeply, until it becomes natural, until you can think in it, dream in it, breathe in it. Where is the line between lonely and alone? It runs straight through the center of your chest. On one side, the ache of someone missing. On the other, the vast quiet of someone finally found. I spent years on the wrong side of that line, afraid of the quiet, running from the room where no one was waiting, filling every space with noise and company and plans so I would never have to sit with the one person I had not yet learned to love. I think this is one of the most misunderstood things in our culture. We treat being alone as a failure, as a symptom, as something to be fixed. We say, she's still single, as though it were a diagnosis. We say, he doesn't have many friends, as though it were a warning sign. And from the earliest age, we are taught that happiness lives in connection, in finding the right partner, in building the right family, in being surrounded by the right people. And connection is beautiful. I am not arguing against it. What I am arguing against is the idea that you need another person to be complete. Because the moment you believe that, you will spend your entire life looking for someone to finish a puzzle that was never missing a piece. If I started over, I would learn to be my own home first. I would learn to cook for one and enjoy it. I would learn to take myself to dinner and not feel embarrassed. I would learn to travel alone and let the world surprise me without filtering every experience through someone else's reactions. I would learn to sit in silence with my own thoughts and not reach for a distraction. Because when you can be alone and be at peace, you enter every relationship from a place of wholeness instead of need. You choose people because they add to your life, not because they fill a void. And that changes everything. Who you choose, how you love, how you stay, and how you leave. The third thing I would do, and this one perhaps surprises people the most, is I would fail on purpose. I would intentionally put myself in situations where I was not guaranteed to succeed. I would try things I was bad at. I would risk things that might not work. I would say yes to things that frightened me and no to things that felt safe but wrong. I would teach myself early and often that failure is not the opposite of success. It is the soil in which success grows. Step off the edge. The ground will meet you, not where you expected, but where you needed. Every fall teaches your bones something new. Every bruise is a map. Every mistake is a door you didn't know was there. Don't walk the safe road. It leads somewhere you've already been. Because what I realize now, looking back, is that fear of failure was the invisible hand that steered every major decision of my life. I chose the safe job over the risky passion. I chose the acceptable relationship over the uncertain one. I chose the path that guaranteed approval over the path that might have led to something extraordinary, but might also have led to nothing at all. And in doing so, I built a life that was comfortable and respectable and deeply, quietly unfulfilled. Not miserable, not tragic, just unfulfilled. The way a meal can be filling but not nourishing. The way a house can be sturdy but not a home. If I started over, I would teach myself that the worst thing that can happen is not failure. The worst thing that can happen is reaching the end of your life and realizing you never truly lived because you were too afraid to risk anything that mattered. Failure is recoverable. Regret is not. And I would rather have a life full of beautiful failures than a life full of safe non-starters. These three things, knowing myself, loving my own company, and embracing failure as a teacher, are what I would do first if I started life over. And I want to be honest with you about something because I think honesty is the only thing that truly helps. I cannot start over. None of us can. The years that are behind me are behind me. The choices I made are made. The letter from my 23-year-old self is evidence of roads not taken, and I cannot go back and walk them. But here is what I also know. I know that starting over does not require a time machine. It requires a decision made today in this moment to begin living differently from this point forward. I can know myself now. I can learn to love my own company now. I can take risks and embrace failure now. The calendar says I am not 23 anymore, but the heart does not care about the calendar. The heart only cares whether you are living truthfully or living asleep, and it is never, never too late to wake up. I think about that young woman who wrote that letter. I think about the fire in her words and the certainty in her handwriting. And I realize she is not gone. She is still here. She has been here all along, buried under layers of compromise and conformity and shoulds and musts. And perhaps the most important thing I have done in these last few months is not discovering what I would do if I started over. It is deciding to do those things now, without starting over, without permission, without waiting for the perfect moment that was never going to come. So if you are here today and you are wondering whether it's too late for you, whether the years behind you are too many and the road ahead is too short, I want you to hear me clearly. It is not too late. It was never too late. The only thing that makes it too late is the decision to keep waiting. You can know yourself today. You can sit alone today. You can risk something today. You can open that journal, that box, that door you have been walking past for years, and you can begin. Keep your faith, whatever that faith looks like for you. Whether you find it in a church, in a forest, in the eyes of a child, or in the quiet of 3 a.m. when the world is asleep and it is just you and whatever power made you. Hold on to that faith, because faith is what tells you that beginnings are always possible, that the door is always open, that the person you were meant to be is still inside you, waiting patiently for you to turn the handle. Do something wonderful for yourself today. Something brave. Something honest. Have a conversation with yourself, a real one, not the kind where you rehearse what you'll say to others, but the kind where you ask yourself what you actually want and you listen to the answer without judging it. Write down 3 things you would do if you started over, and then ask yourself what is stopping you from doing them right now. And if the answer is fear, remind yourself that fear is not a wall. It is a door, and doors are meant to be opened. Be kind to whoever crosses your path today, especially the person in the mirror. That person has been carrying a weight they were never meant to carry alone. That person has been living a script they never wrote. And that person deserves today, not someday, to begin again. Let's all share the courage we are finding. Let's all take this journey together, not backward, not in regret, but forward, into the life we were always meant to live. I will see you in my next video.